For today's lesson, we are going to be creating some found object art using altered books. Found object art is basically when artists use objects that aren't really disguised. Sometimes they're modified, but they are objects or products that are not typically considered materials from which art is made, much like my fascinator today. Let's take a look at our featured artist, Brian Detmer. Brian Detmer is a contemporary American artist who is known for his altered book sculptures.
I'm an artist, and I cut books. This is one of my first book works. It's called Alternate Route to Knowledge. And I wanted to create a stack of books so that somebody could come into the gallery and think that they're just looking at a regular stack of books. But then as they got closer, they would sort of see this rough hole carved into it and wonder what was happening and wonder why and think about the material of the book. So I'm interested in the texture, but I'm more interested in the text and the images that we find within books.
Brian Detmer's inspiration for his sculptures is the actual books themselves. He carves those books in a way that lets the content show through, and it really conveys the message on its own. Let's take a look at how some student artists used books for their inspiration for their projects. This book is about Venice, and as you can see, the artist has created a little representation of the city. This book was called The Archangel. Sometimes the idea you are trying to get across doesn't necessarily go with the book that you have decided to use for your sculpture. So in that case, I recommend kind of covering up the title, the top of the pages where it says what the book is about. That way, your message won't really get muddled.
In most of my work, what I do is I seal the edges of a book with a thick varnish, so it's creating sort of a skin on the outside of the book. So it becomes a solid material, but then the pages inside are still loose. And then I carve into the surface of the book, and I'm not moving or adding anything. I'm just carving around whatever I find interesting. So everything you see within the finished piece is exactly where it was in the book before I began.
You can use a purely subtractive sculpture method, just like Brian Detmer did, where he just carves into the book. You can use a purely additive method, like some of these artists did, or you could use a combination of both. You may want to think about using color, adding embellishments, using more than one book. There is no limit to your imagination.
By destroying books, people don't want to rip books, and nobody really wants to throw away a book, is that we think about books as living things. We think about them as a body, and they're created to relate to our body as far as scale, but they also have the potential to continue to grow and to continue to become new things. So books really are alive.